The cowboy's boots crunched to a halt, just inches from the dust-covered porch of the dilapidated cabin. The sun was setting behind him, casting a long, imposing shadow that fell across the woman and the 3 trembling children huddled behind her skirts. His jaw was a hard line, his weathered face etched with the hardships of the trail. His eyes, sharp and blue as a winter sky, scanned the small, frightened faces one by one. The boy, no older than 10, stood defiantly in front of his sisters, trying to be brave. The middle girl clutched a worn-out rag doll, her lip quivering. The youngest just hid her face completely in her mother's dress. The air grew thick and heavy, the only sound the whisper of the wind through the dry grass. The cowboy's gaze finally settled on the woman. She was worn, but her eyes held a fierce, protective fire. Then he asked the question that seemed to freeze the air itself, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Are these all your children?" The woman swallowed hard, the lump in her throat feeling as big as a stone. She nodded, her heart pounding against her ribs, bracing herself for judgment, for rejection, for the cruelty she had come to expect from the world. She had seen men like him before, hard men made harder by a hard life. She expected him to sneer, to turn his back, maybe even worse. She had a story, a tragic one, but she didn't expect him to care. But the cowboy's expression shifted. His lips curved into something unreadable, a complex mixture of emotions swirling in his eyes. Was it anger? Pain? No, it was something deeper. Resolve. A long, stretched-out silence followed. It felt like an eternity. He seemed to be wrestling with a memory, a ghost from his own past. He looked from the children back to the endless, lonely expanse of the prairie, and then his gaze returned to the little family before him. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried a force that would shatter their world and rebuild it anew. "Good? I'll take everyone." And in that moment, as the woman's eyes widened in disbelief and the first tears of a fragile hope began to fall, the story truly began. His name was Jedediah Kane, a man who rode the plains like a phantom, known more by whispered legends than by fact. Some said he was a retired lawman, others a reformed outlaw. The truth was somewhere in between. He had once had a family of his own, a wife, a son, a daughter. They were his world, his sun and his moon. But a fever, swift and merciless, had swept through their homestead years ago, taking them all and leaving Jedediah with nothing but a cavernous hole in his soul. He had been wandering ever since, a ghost haunted by the laughter he could no longer hear. Now, looking at these children, he saw not strangers, but echoes of what he had lost. He saw his own son's stubborn chin in the young boy. He saw his daughter's wide, curious eyes in the little girl with the rag doll. This wasn't charity. It was a lifeline. A second chance he never thought he'd get. The woman, Sarah, could barely speak. Take them? What do you mean? Her husband had died a year prior, a fool's errand searching for gold, leaving her with 3 mouths to feed and a mountain of debt. She had been fighting to survive, one day at a time, but she was losing. "I mean," Jedediah said, his voice softening, "that no child should have to look that scared. I have a ranch. It's not much, but there's food, a solid roof. I'll raise them as my own. I'll protect them." He looked directly at Sarah. "And you. You're their mother. A family stays together." That night, for the first time in a year, the children slept without the gnawing ache of hunger in their bellies. Sarah watched Jedediah from the doorway of the small bunkhouse he'd given them. He was sitting by the fire, mending the little girl's rag doll with his large, clumsy hands, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. The weeks turned into months. The ranch, once a place of silent solitude, began to fill with life. The boy, whose name was Thomas, followed Jedediah everywhere, learning to mend fences, tend to the horses, and read the land. He slowly shed his defiance, replaced by a quiet admiration for the man who treated him not as a burden, but as a son. The middle girl, Elara, found her voice. She had a laugh that was like wind chimes, and she filled the quiet corners of the house with stories she made up for her dolls. She would often leave wildflowers on the graves Jedediah had built for his family, a silent acknowledgement of the loss that had brought them all together. And the youngest, Lily, who had been too shy to even show her face, became Jedediah's shadow. She would sit on his lap as he read, her small hand often finding its way into his. He taught her the names of the constellations, telling her that each star was a campfire for a traveler in the sky, so they would never feel lost. Sarah watched this transformation with a heart full of gratitude and a growing affection for the gruff cowboy who had saved them. She saw the deep well of sadness that still lived in his eyes, but she also saw it slowly being filled by the love of these children. They were healing him, just as he was healing them. But the past has a long shadow, and the debts Sarah's husband had left behind were not forgotten. One afternoon, a group of rough-looking men rode up to the ranch. Their leader was a man named Blackwood, the cold-hearted landowner to whom Sarah's husband had owed a small fortune. He didn't care about the debt. He saw the ranch, the land, and he wanted it. "This land belongs to Cain," Sarah said, standing on the porch, a rifle in her hands, no longer the trembling woman Jedediah had first met. The children were safely hidden inside. Blackwood sneered, "Cain's a ghost. This is my business. You and those brats are squatting on what's owed to me." Just then, Jedediah rode in from the north pasture. He didn't gallop, he didn't rush. He just moved with a calm, deadly purpose, dismounting slowly. He placed himself between Blackwood's men and the porch, between the danger and his new family. "The debt is with the dead man," Jedediah said, his voice low and flat. "Your business is with me now," Blackwood laughed. "You and what army, old man?" Jedediah didn't answer with words. His hand moved in a blur, a motion so fast it was almost invisible. The revolver was in his hand, cocked and aimed, before Blackwood's men could even process what was happening. The air went still. The arrogance on Blackwood's face melted away, replaced by the stark realization that the legends about Jedediah Cain were not legends at all. He was looking at a man who had nothing left to lose, and who had just found everything worth fighting for. "You ride out of here," Jedediah said, his voice cutting through the silence, "and you never come back. You never look at this land again. You never speak their names again. Because if you do, the ghosts you've heard stories about will seem like bedtime tales compared to me." There was no negotiation. There was only the cold, hard truth in Jedediah's eyes. Blackwood and his men, defeated without a single shot being fired, turned their horses and rode away, swallowed by the dust from which they came. That evening, as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the family sat together on the porch. Thomas was whittling a piece of wood next to Jedediah. Alara was braiding Lily's hair. Sarah sat in a rocking chair, a quiet smile on her face. Jedediah looked at the faces around him, his faces. The gaping hole in his soul wasn't gone, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It was filled with new memories, new laughter, new love. He wasn't just Jedediah Cain, the lonely wanderer. He was a father. He was a protector. He was home. He had ridden up to that dusty porch looking for nothing, a man defined by what he had lost. But in the eyes of 3 scared children and their determined mother, he found a reason to live again. He hadn't just taken them in, they had taken him back from the brink. The cowboy's long ride wasn't over, but for the first time in a very long time, he was no longer riding alone. And that made all the difference. The wind on that stretch of land had always been cruel, but today it felt personal. It tugged at Clara Mayfield's worn dress and carried dust into her eyes as she stood on the porch of the small, weather-beaten farmhouse. Behind her, 6 children clung together like frightened birds' bare feet, patched clothes, eyes too old for their ages. They had learned early that the world did not bend easily for people like them. Clara had once believed love was enough. That faith died slowly, buried beside her husband, under a wooden cross on the hill. He had been kind, but kindness didn't stop illness, and it certainly didn't stop debt. When he passed, the landowners circled like vultures. Bills piled up, food ran thin. Nights grew longer, colder, quieter. Each morning, Clara woke with the same fear. How much longer can I keep them safe? The children sensed it too. Sarah, the oldest at 12, had started skipping meals without being asked. The twins pretended hunger was a game. Little Eli still believed tomorrow would magically fix everything. Clara smiled for them, even when her hands shook while kneading dough that barely filled half a pan. That morning, the sound of hooves broke the fragile calm. A single rider approached, slow and deliberate. He wasn't one of the gentle ones from town who brought pity disguised as prayers. This man rode like the land belonged to him, and maybe it did. He dismounted without a word, tall, broad-shouldered. His coat was dark, his face harder than the terrain beneath his boots. Everyone knew him by reputation alone. Caleb Blackwood. Ranch owner, lone cowboy. A man said to have no mercy left in him after life took everything he loved. Clara's heart pounded as he approached. She had heard stories how he bought land from desperate families, how no one ever argued his terms. She stepped forward instinctively, placing herself between him and the children, even though fear screamed at her to run. He didn't look at her at first. His gaze went straight to the children, studying them with an intensity that made Sarah squeeze Clara's hand tighter. One by one, he counted them silently. Clara felt exposed, judged, reduced to a number on a ledger. Then came the question. Are these all your children? His voice was low, edged with something sharp anger, maybe. Or something worse, Clara's mind raced. If I lie, he'll know. If I tell the truth, I lose them. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to speak. Yes, she said softly. All of them. The wind howled between them. The children waited. Clara braced herself for the verdict she had been expecting for months. The loss of the land, the house, maybe even the children. She had prepared for heartbreak, for humiliation, for begging. But what she hadn't prepared for was the way his eyes changed. Caleb Blackwood inhaled slowly, as if steadying something deep inside him. His jaw clenched. For a moment, it looked like anger won. Then grief flickered across his face, raw, unguarded, gone as quickly as it appeared. Good, he said at last. Clara's knees nearly gave out. I'll take everyone. The words echoed louder than thunder. The children gasped. Sarah pulled her siblings back in fear. Clara's mind screamed no, but her lips refused to move. She searched his face for cruelty, for satisfaction, but found neither. Instead, there was a strange resolve, like a man making a promise to himself rather than a threat to others. You can't, Clara finally whispered. They're my children. Caleb looked at her, then really looked. Not like an owner or a collector of broken things, but like a man staring into a mirror of pain he recognized too well. I know, he said quietly. That's why. The wind slowed, the dust settled. And without understanding how or why, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years rise in her chest, not relief. Not fear, but the fragile, terrifying beginning of hope. And this was only the first step into a journey none of them could yet imagine. If you want to know what happens next for Clara, Caleb, and the children, subscribe to my channel and get ready for the rest of this incredible story. Thanks for watching.